Morning, Dougie.
Good
I
morning.
understand Dougie Alexander for the folks here. Dougie is going to discuss several things with us this morning in his house in Falkirk, and I see about 3 or 4 squirrels, grey squirrels, going up and down trees in front of me. So if I get a wee bit distracted, it's the squirrels, it's no Dougie. So that's about 3 I'm counting there. Anyway, there's another one. So we're going to discuss Dougie's life in piping, if you like. Well, it's not pipes, drumming, but it's related piping and drumming. And also it took him over to Brittany and various other things. So we'll just start the ball rolling. Dougie, if you always stayed in Falkirk, and where were you born, all that sort of stuff, give us a wee sort of sentence or two.
Well, I was born in Edinburgh, and my mother belonged to Kilsyth in the west.
Mm-hmm.
She had been in service during the war, and she obviously wanted to go back home. So we went back to Kilsyth when I was 4 years old. I progressed through school, and my first job was in the North British Locomotive Company in Springburn in Glasgow.
What was that again? The motor company?
North British Locomotive
Oh,
Company.
locomotive company, right, aye. Made engines for rail.
Locomotives, yes, rail engines, aye, all over the world.
Aye, go to India and all that sort
That's
of stuff.
correct,
Africa,
aye. South Africa, yes.
Yeah,
aye.
yeah. Uh-huh. And what sort of job did you actually do there?
I started off in the drawing office,
Mm-hmm.
and after a year, I was a bit bored at sitting at a desk all day, so
Aye.
I went to the personnel officer and asked if we could vary my 5-year apprenticeship. So I went for there into the workshops. There was one workshop in Hyde Park, another in Atlas, and the one they called Dubs's was down at Queen's Park.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, I was involved in the manufacturing and progression with steam locomotives.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved into the diesel area.
Uh-huh.
So
What year roughly was that?
I started in the North British in 1956.
Okay. So, and the diesel?
The diesel was quite a job. We were actually building the engines
Right.
on licence from MAN in Germany.
Huh?
And we're also building diesel hydraulics and diesel electrics. Both the hydraulics was Voith German,
Mm-hmm.
and the electrics were they were German too, believe it or not. So
What sort of functions did these do? The hydraulics and the electric.
they were the drive.
Okay. For the parts of the railway engine, if you like.
They drove the locomotive.
Yeah.
And I developed right through building the diesel engines and then installing them in the locomotive.
Mm-hmm.
Right through, we were test running the engines. We went as far as Derby, Swindon,
Mm-hmm.
with coaches at behind, and it was very interesting. Then, when my apprenticeship was finished, the bad news came. Firstly, the company got a letter from the government saying that the standard of the locomotives was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
But
Aye.
there was 2 locomotives factories nearby, one being St Rollocks and one being Cowlairs.
Aye, St Rolls and Cowlairs, everything in Glasgow, of course, just for the listener. Right?
Yeah, right. So that was really disappointing because I really liked the place, I liked the job. So then they came with closing date.
Mm-hmm.
In the interim period, I met my wife in Falkirk at the ice rink.
Okay.
She belonged to Alloa.
Mm-hmm.
So I explained to my future father-in-law at that time the situation, and he worked with United Glass Bottlers, where they manufactured all types of glass enclosures, jam jars, whiskey bottles,
Beer bottles.
beer bottles, you name it.
And for a listener again, I happen to know that Alloa make beer.
Well, there was two breweries just adjacent to the glassworks.
Okay, so they would serve one another, if you like.
Correct, aye.
And they also have a football club, Alloa, that played Celtic just last week.
That's right, aye.
Aye, and they kicked Celtic off the park, but still managed to get beat 2-1 in the process. It's just so Alloa's a lively wee place, you know, right?
That's great.
Right.
So, well then, he got me a job in the glassworks on the maintenance side, which was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So, I was in charge of this section of the work for the mechanics of the machine and the maintenance of the machine,
Yeah.
or machines. At that time, I wasn't doing too much in the pipe band scene.
Okay.
I just met the wife and so forth, so that explains everything.
Right. Okay.
I then got asked if I'd join Kenil Colliery Pipe Band.
So can we rewind just a wee second, Dougie? When did you start with drumming then?
Well, I'll go back to when I was.
Okay. Right. Fine.
I'll go back to when I was 9 years old.
Ah. Right.
Well, I started learning when I was 7,
Mm-hmm.
and I played at Cowell when I was 9. That was with Kilsyth Thistle Pipe Band.
Right.
They were in grade 3.
Okay.
And then,
Any kind of famous folk in that band that later went on
Well-
to make their mark?
well, the tutor that we had was the ex-pipe major of Muirhead and Sons, Pipe Major Jimmy Wilson,
Okay.
who Jackie Smith followed Jimmy,
Mm-hmm.
and as you know, Bob Hardy followed Jackie.
Uh-huh.
And the drum instructor was his son Hugh,
Mm-hmm.
who also played with Muirheads.
Right. So that's a
So-
link right away.
It was a good grounding.
Uh-huh.
Hugh was competing in the World Solos, which was in Glasgow at that time in the academy,
Yeah.
and he said to me and the secretary of the band, enter Dougie for the juveniles.
Uh-huh.
So the secretary came and said, I've got a total rear end of it,
Mm-hmm.
that you're no entered.
Mm-hmm.
So Hugh said, right, enter them for the adults.
Mm-hmm.
By this time I was 14,
Right.
and I played in the adults, and I tied for 6th place with Bert Barr of Shots and Dykehead,
For goodness sake.
when I was in grade 3, Kilsyth Thistle.
Now, a couple of wee questions here. When drummers are competing in the solo drumming, they're normally accompanied by one piper. I take it that was the case there, and if so, who actually played for you that day? Do you remember?
Pipe Major Jimmy Wilson,
Okay,
ex-Muirheads.
great. And the next question is, what did he play? Was it a March of Spain reel? Or,
March of Spain Reel.
do you remember the tunes?
Abercairney Highlanders, Dorney Ferry, and Alex C. McGregor.
Well done. Aye. The suspe would maybe be a wee bit easier than a lot of other suspes, or is that
I would
just
say it was
up?
easier to execute,
Yeah, yeah.
and you got your timing easier.
Yeah.
But
You
Jimmy
still could
Wilson,
phrase it and everything. Aye.
aye, exactly.
Aye.
But Hugh was a very good instructor,
Aye.
and Jimmy was excellent.
Yeah.
Before we went on stage, or even practicing in the band hall, never take your eyes off my foot.
Aye.
I had to watch him all the time. But
Aye.
and believe it or not, the winner of the juvenile
Aye.
section that I didn't get to play in was Alec Dowie of Muirheads.
Ah, for goodness sake, yeah.
And his father, Andrew, was the pipe sergeant at Muirheads.
Uh-huh.